There you go. So now we're live. So just making sure that we're keeping track of what we're doing here in case that we ever really write something about this. Okay, cool. So Jeremiah, just continue your thought.
Just echoing what you and Ian have both said. I've been slammed and haven't made any progress on this either. My thought, though, was the original call for submissions noted that it's a rolling deadline starting the 15th of July. So I don't know if that means, there's an opportunity to shape something and submit a little bit later.
I think that's our only option anyway, so that's going to be that's a pretty easy option for us. There's no way that we have anything ready for the 15th. So, and I don't think that they're going to be, just buried in submissions on the 15th.
Okay.
So I think that's probably the only thing that we can actually expect. Or we can just say that it's a total failure and just move on with our lives, which is also an option.
I would love to make sure that we talk about some stuff right now.
Yeah, that's fine by me too.
Yeah.
And
go ahead.
So I read a couple of I skimmed
Go
a
for
couple
it.
of the articles. I think the one that Adeline had written. And then I latched on to the concept of chronotope, and I don't know if that was one that you had put up, Mathieu.
I didn't know about it. I think it's actually George.
Okay. I mean, it's a literary term that I had encountered.
It might have been Ian, actually.
Oh, Ian. Yeah. You're right.
I mean, can we let's put that on the agenda as a topic that maybe we could talk about for a couple minutes, and I could say a couple things about. And what
Go right ahead.
What do you guys have on your mind? I mean, as far as when you were thinking about what you would write about for this in the last week or so.
Want to start, Jeremiah, or?
I can take a shot at that.
Okay,
yeah.
go ahead.
So we. Looking at our own group as kind of an exemplar for what we're describing, it seems like one type of group is the one that's focused on producing an artifact, right? And another one might be a group that's interested in digging into questions they have about a topic. And there may be other types of ad hoc PLNs, but I think it might be useful just to kind of break down the differences between those and ways that online environments can support those and ways, barriers that might exist as well.
Okay. So it just occurred to me. I mean, I'm writing this dissertation I started 20 years ago. It's just the most fucked up story you could ever imagine.
And but now you're on record.
It's real. And part of actually what I'm doing this week is I'm trying to finish off a part of it, and I'm also guest curating for a Twitter feed, a British one called We the Humanities. But I was trying to explain this historical work that I'm doing, which is about late 19th century Vienna and the development of social networks among liberal social scientists, primarily ethnographers. And there's a very interesting activist dimension because it was specifically a response to anti-Semitism and German Slav divisions. But it was also very much a kind of sort of civic national undertaking. That is, ethnography would represent the complexity of the Austrian nation. Anyway, the point is that I started actually doing some social network mapping of these 19th century figures. And I really like the idea of, and then as I've been microblogging, I've been making the connection between this historical material and the question of social network mapping now as a tool. So I'm using this tool to apply back then, but it's very helpful if I'm doing that mapping to say, okay, how do we organize to solve a problem? So those are really the kinds of questions that I'm interested in the 19th century are the ways that joint research is undertaken and the first professional sponsored research projects are undertaken. So I don't know if you guys would be receptive to a kind of historical discussion of that. I mean, around sort of like, I could interject this material about late 19th century collaborative networks, I guess is what I'm saying.
I think it makes a lot of sense because you do want, collaboration isn't new. I think that what's new is the channels
Right.
that we're using for collaboration and the way that work is organized. I think that the coordination and collaboration just required a lot more efforts and capital before than it does now.
Right.
But starting from that perspective and seeing how even in the digital world, a lot of people are still thinking that it requires all that capital and all that overhead, which is not necessarily the case. So I think that's the point we're trying to make in some way.
Right. Well, so it occurs to me that since that I really need to put my money where my mouth is in general and show some schematic diagrams, and then maybe by sharing those with you, we could sort of make some generalizations about, what these, for example, what an artifact producing PLN, what its component processes are, what its roles are, what templates are for sort of analyzing it, and terms for assessing its function.
Mm-hmm. Do you know how to share your screen on Google Hangouts?
I don't.
Okay, I'll show you real quick because actually I can share my screen and show you. So give me a second. So when you hover over the section here, the second button says Screen Share, the green one, and then it should prompt you with a pop-up where you choose. So when you hover over in the Google Hangouts on Air on this side here, you should see my screen right now. So the button that says Screen Share, and then when you click on it, it should open up a prompt. It might not be directly in front of the window, and then you choose which screen or which application you want to share.
I see. Okay. So it's the green button on the left. I see.
Yep.
Okay. So I didn't actually. Well, I mean, I've been working with Scapel. Has either of you ever worked with Scapel?
No.
No, but we'd love to learn.
Okay. Let me figure out.
How do you spell that?
SCAPPLE. It's a diagramming tool that works really well with that is from a group called Literature and Latte, which is a very, very powerful writing software tool that is very useful for writing scripts, but also for any kind of complicated research project. You can break it down into parts. Anyway, I can talk about that at some other point. But I mean, as a working method, are you guys seeing this screen now, the Scapel screen, or what are you? Oh.
No.
Okay.
When you accept the screen share, it should take over your camera.
Oh, okay. Here we go.
There you go. We got it now.
Okay.
Yep. Now we see it.
All right. So now I'm dragging it. You can see it, right?
Yep. We're good.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So I really like the idea of, for example, being able to I'm going to just start in a new area. I'm going to say, so we're looking at collaborative structures. So why don't you guys, just for the hell of it, why don't you prompt me with some keywords to use based on what we've just said already?
We'd say corporate overhead or something like that.
Okay.
maybe timeline, discovery, self-selection.
Okay. Why don't we switch over? And do you want to alternate? Do you want to add a couple of terms, Jeremiah?
We don't. So okay, so you're taking notes and because you're sharing your screen, but we don't
I
have
just got
access to
your
the
audio
actual
back,
document.
so I'm really just
Okay.
struggling to
All
listen
right.
right now.
All right. So I mean, I guess the bottom line is, I would love to spend time in an environment like this with you, with both of you, where we did some mapping, and based on what we saw on the screen, we also added in comment bubbles where we said, okay, this is what's going on here, and this is why I think it's interesting.
Yep. So it seems good. It sounds good to me. I think that the only
We could
problem
do a
is
shared sketchpad. I don't know how awkward this is, but isn't there an affordance in Google Drive for this?
yes.
So if we're doing something with a historical perspective, how would that resonate for you guys?
I think you got to start somewhere, and history is as good as anywhere to start with.
So I mean, would you guys have some? For example, if we said, you know,
Yeah, it's not a super. It's not a strong affinity for me, but some perspective could be helpful, as Matthew said.
I mean, so if you started to think about the history of the professional practices that you operate in, you know, so at what point did people start using questionnaires? At what point did they start doing? Well, I mean, I get what. I actually, I guess it's best if we look at examples of people producing artifacts and digging into questions. Maybe that would be a really good thing to reflect on historically. We take a couple of different instances of that over
Well,
time.
I mean that's something I've been.
Go ahead. So tell me. Go.
It's something I've been struggling with because I think let's take poster sessions as an example of a forum for sharing research. Yep. So I've been wondering when the poster became the artifact for sharing research, as opposed to using just standing up with a laptop and showing examples. So one thing that's been frustrating me at work is we have this construct of the poster session, right? And it's great for people who run print shops, but it's probably unnecessarily stressful for people who just want to be in the same time in the same place and show a brief synopsis of their work.
Right.
So for me, that when you talk about the history of our work artifacts, that's what immediately comes to mind.
Right. Right.
Well, conferences are also an artifact in many ways.
So it's not only useful to go back and take a look at the origins of these things, but also to kind of question why we're still holding on to social patterns that may not be efficient anymore.
Right. So and I would suggest that Matthew, is that something you sent this morning about? Would you say that in a face-to-face conversation? Was that on your Google page today? Something. Well, I mean,
the disinhibition thing.
Right.
That wasn't me, but
Matthew, your audio dropped out.
Okay.
But I like what you said about conferences being potentially worth questioning anyway, if not obsolete.
Yeah. But so questioning.
We still don't have audio for you.
Okay. I'm actually not muted, and my connection is actually pretty fast.
Nope, you're back. I hear you.
Okay. So in any case, so we were saying question ways that.
Whoops.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's the fun part of let's just put a couple of break. Yeah, there
Okay,
you go.
it's probably me.
Yeah. So question ways that that knowledge is spread out.
Hello. Yes.
In academia.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you. You're very helpful.
So including poster sessions,
All right. I'll touch you later.
conferences,
Right.
papers. Okay. Any other stuff? Well, there's also the whole vetting process actually. That's an overhead that has value, but could be done in a more efficient way with digital technologies.
Okay.
Right.
So I mean, if we consider that analysis that we're doing is about optimizing, right? We're trying to, right?
Yeah, it's a fair assessment.
So if we consider these practices and ask what the component functions are that they fulfill, then we want to assess based on that, right? We want to say, I mean, I think that the sort of the granular structure of a working group. I mean, if you had a well-functioning student group of 6 students and you followed it for 6 months, that would be an incredibly interesting data set, right? And then the question is, what would be revealed, right? What are the kinds of things that would be revealed? So if we start with sort of asking the questions about some of that measurement data that would happen in that group, and then if we use that to do a structural comparison with other kinds of groups over time, you know, where we'd say, well, for example, you know, at a certain kind of salon, posing was in fact the most important outcome in social status, as opposed to different kinds of internalization of different kinds of learning, different kinds of participation. I mean, learning through participation in a complex social group seems like that's one of the things that we're optimizing for.
Yeah, I think that we could analyze it from a again, from your historical perspective, and say, okay, these are some of the artifacts, some of the things that were important in the past when people worked together on certain projects, and now these are some of the practices that social media and basically what we were talking about, the grassroots self-directed groups and little guilds that form in those social media. Why, you know, what are they optimizing? What are they, you know, how did this context actually change? And what kind of work can actually be expected from these groups now, if any?
Right. So there's, I mean, we could say that every learning group is different. Every learning network is different, right? They're like snowflakes.
Yep.
And that there's infinite possibility for innovation, which is a fabulous concept, you know.
Yeah, because and every one of us is a different snowflake that intersects with other snowflakes in some way. Because, you know, even the network itself around the task at hand is different from the network of the individuals.
Right. Well, and so for example, you can set up you do set up constraints within a space where, for example, you're only speaking German, or you are only speaking Elizabethan English or some other kind of affectation, or you're, you know, you can only speak in sentences that are three words long, or something like that. So there's, I
And
mean, I guess I like that idea. I mean, one of the 19th century concepts that I'm working with is the plasticity of mind. That is to say that in contradistinction to sort of racial science ideas that says, intelligence and personality and so forth is hardwired,
mhm,
and so improvability is limited. We have sort of more humanistic kinds of advocates who talk about, really about this sort of sciences of linguistics as opposed to hard sciences in ethnography. So where there is that incredible amount of variability and specificity. Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm rambling a little bit. But the plasticity concept is a kind of it's a good one to keep in mind because the possibilities of invention are so radical within these new spaces, right?
yeah. Okay, well, Jeremiah, it seems like you always drop out, so I guess you're gonna leave us for now. Okay, cool. So Jeremiah's out, so it's
Yeah.
just you and me, Lawrence. So that reminded me of concepts of like nature versus nurture and mindsets and that kind of stuff. What you were talking about, the plasticity, but I think that it's a very relevant um, discussion to have as a part of what we're doing here. Um, because I think a lot of people actually that's their first barrier. If they don't have a growth mindset, if they don't feel like, if they don't believe that they can learn and that they're their own agents
Ah,
um, of learning, then that's kind of the first barrier to actually make connections that are going to be relevant for their professional development.
that's right. That's right. That's right. That's key. That really is key.
Hmm.
So the teacher has to be constantly sending out positive, reinforcing messages. That is really one of the most perhaps obvious, but not really at all obvious
Hmm.
elements. Pedagogy, the teacher is a coach, and is a motivator, and is supposed to create a playing field where motivation creates positive feedback loops.
Yep.
So we want to have a bunch of assessment tools, a bunch of matrices or rubrics with which we can analyze these learning networks, right?
Yep.
And
But I think at least to compare them, not necessarily, do it's just compare and contrast. Have some visual representations that are going to, present that. Um, just with a couple of criteria that we established. So, for instance, if we're talking about um, differences in how you join a group, something that's assigned by a superior versus something that is self-directed, self-motivated. So you could have a couple of different criteria to look at and come up with contrasts and stuff that's similar between the different contexts and
right,
start from an historical perspective. And maybe you could have a couple of different milestones historically. So you could think of like the 1800s, so pre-industrial.
well, so how about this? I mean, since you're at Delaware and since Tracy is, I presume that Tracy will pop back into this discussion.
Yeah, she's at the beach today, but
Um, let's talk about museum practice.
okay.
So let's use some examples from the collecting history of your institution. So and I apologize. Is Winter Tour? Are you guys connected to Winter Tour? Are you
Um, Not personally, but I know that UD is.
okay? And is Tracy, is the museum studies connected to Winter Tour?
I am not 100% sure. I know that art conservation is.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
They probably are in some way, shape, or form because it's so it's pretty close.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, you know, I mean, I keep coming back to the people that I'm working on right now, partly because they're really interesting. But one of them is Franz Boas, the father of American anthropology,
Hmm.
um, and he also sort of created the precedent for sort of diorama installations of at natural history museums. So at
Okay.
the so that's it's sort of that period of invention of the terms of display and collecting.
Hmm.
It's a very interesting time of formation, and that's the moment. So it's the people who are dealing with artifacts, right, and trying to organize them for other people to turn them into usable. How about this? Um, Usable objects. Um, what does it take to turn a random artifact into um, an artifact with a lot of teaching value?
Hmm.
Its usability. So we assess that according to the effectiveness of the learning that's happening in a class. So a good use of an artifact is something that we want to quantify.
Hmm.
And so then we ask, well, what are the attendant skills? What are the how do you create? I mean, you said okay, the typology you're assigned to join.
Hmm.
So the question it's not as interesting. Sort of, did you stumble on it or did someone tell you to go there? In a way, the most interesting question is how do you get motivated and become part of it and internalize it and become central to it? What are those factors that can help produce that kind of engagement?
Hmm.
I mean pedagogy does that obviously.
Yeah, but
Bottom
it's
line,
so
but
basically it's taking something that looks like a professional artifact of some nature in any discipline and turning it into something that for another audience, and usually what we do is instructional design in that sense. We just talk with the subject matter expert and turn it into something that a novice
right,
can understand and start scaffolding and building their expertise.
right,
Um, but that's so like what you were talking about, the diaporama and that kind of stuff. That's kind of that's the gateway to a larger knowledge of the other stuff.
right,
Some
right.
people are gonna always stay at that level. They're always stay on the at
That's
the kind of the consumer level and say,
that's
you
right.
know what, I know enough.
That's right. That's right. That's right. So let's take that concept right there to stay at the consumer level. So to fail to advance.
Hmm. And
Uh,
is it a failure or is it a choice? Because
well,
at some point there is an
well,
aspect of you can't be an expert in everything.
right, right. That's right. That's right. I mean, so here. I mean, this is a good place for me to make one brief tangent, which is to say, digital badges are the shit.
Hmm.
And what I'm understanding from them is that they can specify very, very specific skills, like you know, being able to teach effectively with an artifact, say, if that's a skill that you work on, and then um, not only can you have different levels of advancement of that, but you can have different levels of mastery of that particular skill.
Hmm.
So from 1 to 5, 1 being something that someone with either with or without a high school degree could do, where 2 would be what an undergraduate could do, and 3 is what a graduate student can do, and then 4 and 5 are getting up towards guru status. But if we sort of, as we talk about the collaborative systems that we're describing, if we consider that what we want to optimize in that process is the outcome, which shows these upticks.
Yeah, and in some cases, basically the outcome that a learner is going to be looking for might be just to have an emergent, view of that specific object or that specific topic.
Right.
And so like it's kind of the continuum, the spectrum that you're describing is kind of a continuum between being a novice and an expert.
Right.
The ones in between are like being a novice, being kind of an emergent intermediate, then you become literate or conversant in that space, and then you're not necessarily an expert, but you're able to to understand the grasp of what it is and make connections with other stuff. And then the expertise is where you become very, basically you're the go-to person for that thing, and you can you understand it like just completely. So but in certain cases, so like for instance, I have a vegetable garden at home, and I'm not looking to become a real farmer.
Right.
But I want to be kind of literate and not necessarily an expert, but I want to know just enough so that I can grow my own vegetables and do something with them.
Let's use gardening as a recurrent metaphor, because I'm into it also, and I think a learning ecosystem is a really good way to talk about it. Just as Badges Alliance is talking about building a badges ecosystem, in Chicago, City of Learning. This is great, man. I'm enjoying this interaction with you, and I like the way your mind moves.
Are you still using that diagram, or do you want to come back to your webcam?
Oh, no, I'm not using the diagram.
So you just click on the little green button again, and it's going to come back to your webcam. There you go.
Oh, okay. Now we can see, oh, man, I need a shave.
Well, you're probably on vacation or something.
Something. On vacation from reality, maybe.
Yeah.
So, how would you like to proceed?
Well, at this point, so we have a couple of, I captured a couple of little quotes and little things that when you were talking. So on the document that if you look at the chat, there's actually at 311 there's a notes link. That's just a new Google Doc that I started because I just needed to have a place where I could start taking a couple of notes. I think that we already have. I've captured a couple of things that could be just jumping points. Again, you were using that diagram, and I think that a lot of what we do now is not necessarily linear, and we do have tools to work knowledge in a network, which is kind of a similar idea. We're all coming in from different perspectives, and we're trying to make bridges that didn't exist before.
You said knowledge in a network. What was the phrase? Can you repeat that sentence?
I was just saying that we're all coming in with different perspectives in how knowledge is organized and linked together, and the way that we're connected as human beings is kind of reflects the way that we work with knowledge, and now we have, instead of having just very linear tools that like a piece of paper that's just sequential, we do have tools that allow us to replicate the neural network of knowledge and neural network of humans connecting and talking to one another and basically making bridges where there were not before. Where a lot of people in different disciplines have worked in silos for many, many, many years. And now, with digital technologies and with those kind of informal settings, you're able to actually start making bridges, making connections between disciplines that basically can lead to innovation, can lead to practices from disciplines to spread across other ones,
Right. Right.
and create new disciplines altogether.
Well, so why don't I integrate some historical examples from what I'm writing on in the next
Sure.
few weeks? All right. So, um, um,
So I can actually come in. Hold on. There's a document that's called um, the draft for new professional development literacy. I'm going to share the URL in the chat. And so we could put a couple of notes here in maybe in the introduction. We could have an historical perspective.
sure. Yeah. So I mean, there's a particular mobilization. There's the description of the Germans. Let's see, the Journal of Ethnopsychology in 1860, and the description at the beginning of it is about how to organize a, a discourse that will be about collaboration, and it uses metaphor of building, laying out the plan of the building where that will happen,
Mm-hmm.
and then also about creating uh, a hub and spokes.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I can sort of sell this mindset of system building back in that historical moment.
Mm-hmm. So, but it's still, yeah.
And the utility of that everybody as users of knowledge has to create their own metaphors and their own diagrams,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
To become advanced users of knowledge. So that's one of the advanced users of knowledge have to be able to use material in complicated ways.
Mm-hmm.
In the term brick. Well, you're French. You're Canadian. Are you Canadian?
I'm French Canadian, yeah.
Yeah. So bricoleur, bricolage,
Bricolage, yeah.
has a certain currency in literary theory. I think via French literary theory.
Mm-hmm.
But the breaking the fashioning together a bunch of different skills as a bricoleur,
Mm-hmm.
joining a bunch of things together in a treatment of something could well be a bricolage. And bricolage is a good outcome of an interdisciplinary group. I mean, bricolage plus organization. Anyway.
Okay.
Thank you for letting me chat.
That's fine. Okay, so yeah, so I've just took a couple of notes in the actual document that I shared in the chat.
Okay.
And yeah, you can definitely, if basically if you want to start just throwing ideas
Yeah.
in
In the document.
in the meat of the document or whatever, that would be fine. That would get us somewhere and
Yeah.
give us some context. And then we can definitely make connections with the old idea of badges and making your
Sure.
making your learning visible.
Mm. Mm.
And it's not even making learning, but making skills, learning, interests, and stuff like that, so that basically the more transparent you are as a professional, the more likely you'll make relevant connections, because
Right.
people will find you
Right.
if your work is transparent. And if it's behind a firewall or behind a paywall,
Right.
in the dark web instead of being in the open web, then all of a sudden you're basically reducing significantly chances for collaboration, chances for benchmarking, chances for just serendipity in progressing in your career and progressing science in general.
So when you said benchmarking just now,
Mm-hmm.
what were you what was that in reference to?
Well, benchmarking is something that we talk a lot more in business. It's the idea that you want to expose something to other people, and you want to see how it compares with competition, how it compares with if it sticks, and if other people are, it's kind of benchmarking in terms of business is really looking at your competition and seeing if your strategy holds up with what your competitors are doing. What are some of the business practices, or what are some of the stuff that other people are doing? And benchmarking in computer terms is actually about performance. So you want to benchmark the computer processor speed in comparison with its competitors or its previous ones to see if it's faster and whatever. So benchmarking is around the idea of making sure that your practices are are basically good practices that can compare with other practices that are available out there.
Right, right. So so it's a benchmarking as distinct from a particular benchmark term. Okay, cool. So I like this very much, and I'll try and do some outlining.
Yeah. Well, in any case, and I think that we don't necessarily need to use the full hour at this point. I have a big workload to finish until the end of the day. So, and so we can definitely, if you want to jump into that Google Doc and start, drafting some stuff that's really, instead of being just fragments, just real paragraphs of stuff that you feel could be good intros to. And even if it's not something that we're going to use in the final version or whatever, I think that the whole idea really is that specific Google Doc is actually also going to have a history of its own.
Right.
We'll be able to go back in the revision histories and actually find out if something has been edited, find out if something has been tweaked, find out if something has been moved. And that's also a different way to actually work in digital environments.
That's great. That's great. And I'll figure out how to a workflow so that I can get some of these pictures, some of these graphic images into forms that are usable for people.
Yeah, well, and so I know that because your tool itself, is something that you can do yourself. I think that the whole idea really is that once we get to a point where this is something that we want to include as a figure, then we could share, rough drafts. Just
right.
As you could just take screenshots and share them in the document, or something
right.
like that, and then we can come up with. We do have skills in the group that even somebody could say, because I have, like, for instance, I have a degree in graphic design and I've done a lot of those little diagrams and stuff. So
I would love to get some mentoring from you, some really just some elementary workflow tips.
Yeah,
great. So I'll be happy to work with you on that.
Okay, it's all good.
That's great.
Okay, good. So
so we'll be in touch.
Yep.
Next week we'll see what's what, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think that let me just check my schedule for next week, but I think I should be able to actually schedule another one of those. Hold on, where's my schedule again? Of course I don't have it open. There it is. Yeah, Friday afternoon of next week should be okay, in theory.
Friday?
Yeah. Well, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Cool. So that makes sense. Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Have
Lawrence.
a good weekend. Bye.
Yep. You too. Bye.